You are listening to Co-Create Your Life. In this podcast, we delve deep into the law of attraction, dispel common misconceptions, and give our listeners the tools they need to build a magical, purposeful existence in their everyday lives. Reclaim the creative power you already possess and join us at co-creationcoaching.org/create. That's co-creationcoaching.org/create.
Welcome to Co-Create Your Life. This is episode 14, an interview with Nathalie Thompson. I am Brandon Oliveras.
And I'm Christina Oliveras.
And I am Justin Williams.
Very excited today. All right, so today we have an exciting podcast here going. We're having an interview, again, like I said in the title, with Nathalie Thompson from Vibe Shifting. And I'll introduce her in a second. Before I get into all that, I want to make some announcements. We have, as always, our show notes. If you would like to see the show notes for this episode, and I'll also link to Nathalie's website over there. You can go to co-creationcoaching.org/create014. And if you would like to ask questions for future Co-Create Your Life podcast, you can head over to co-creationcoaching.org/ask/create. And that's where you can submit your questions. So once again, we have someone today that I've been following her website for quite a while, so I'm excited to have her on today. Nathalie Thompson is the author of Fearless and Mind Shifting, a dream-building catalyst and motivational expert. She is the head dream catcher at vibeshifting.com, where she helps people figure out what they really want in life and then shows them how to get it. So without further ado, how are you doing, Nathalie Thompson? We're really happy to have you on today with us.
I am very well, thanks, Brandon. I'm so glad to be here.
Oh, we're excited. We've been planning this for probably a month now or so.
I know. My fault. I got sick.
Oh, it's no problem. It happens. But we're happy that we finally figured this all out. So I got everything working. So just to kind of get into it, let us know, first of all, how did you get into the law of attraction? I know you have a lot of articles and other things on your website about the law of attraction and achieving your dreams. So what first got you into it? I saw you have some interesting background, as we'll get into later, but what got you into it first?
Originally, it was ages and ages ago, years and years and years ago, I read Louise Hay's book, You Can Heal Your Life.
Oh, yeah.
And at the time, it made me angry. And I put it away, and I didn't look at it again for years. But I didn't get rid of it, which was unusual. Usually when a book annoys me that much, I just get rid of it. I don't want it on my shelf. I want it gone. I threw it in a drawer, and I didn't look at it again until years later. There was something happening in my life, and I was like, I have vague memories of her saying something about this. And I went and I looked up in her, and the reason it annoyed me so much was because at the time, I was probably in my early 20s at the time when I first read this book, late teens, early 20s. And it struck me very much as a blame the victim kind of approach, which it bothered me. It really, really bothered me. And it wasn't until much later in life that I was able to look at what she was saying differently and to realize that it was not at all a blame the victim approach to things. It was more a different way of looking at situations to help people to reclaim the power that they already have, but have forgotten through difficulties and suffering, this power that they've forgotten that they have. So when I went back to this book years later, and I was able to see it from that perspective, that changed a whole lot of things for me. Yeah. And it sort of led to the beginning of a journey at that point. Like after that, it went to The Secret, which a lot of people love to bash The Secret for many, many reasons.
Right, yeah, I do.
But The Secret was the start of a great many people's journey.
Yeah, it's a good introduction.
Because for many people, it's the introduction. It's their first introduction to these concepts.
Right.
And the problem with The Secret is if you just leave it with that, then that's where the problems come with, right?
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
But if you sort of use that as a stepping stone, if The Secret became your stepping stone to further the journey, then I think it achieved
Right. Yeah.
an awful lot for an awful lot of people. So I'm not one of those people who likes to bash The Secret just because of that, because I think it was such a great introduction to these kinds of concepts for so very many people.
Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah, it's, the law of attraction. I mean, it's been around. I mean, if you look back, there's so many
it's been around forever.
Older books, especially back from the early 20th century.
Well, see, that was the thing with The Secret, is because after I'd read the book, and I read the book, I didn't see the movie at first. I saw it later, but I read this book and I was like, wow. And I went through and I looked up all the references that she had made in that book. I went back and I read like the Master Key System, and I read Napoleon Hill, and I read all of these guys, all of the sort of ancient, well, not ancient, but the really old,
century old, yeah.
Yeah. References that she'd mentioned. I went through and I looked up all the original source books. I have them all sitting on my shelf now, but I read them all. So that sort of it sort of furthered my journey. It led me to people like Mike Dooley, who I have an awful lot of respect for Mike Dooley and what he does. Mm-hmm. But it was all little steps that sort of added one on top of each other to lead me to where I am today.
Yeah.
So that was the start of my journey with law of attraction in the form of law of attraction.
Right. So when you say that, do you mean that? Because I know for me, when I got into it, I realized that I had really always been using it, and I was able to look back and see, okay, here's how I used it in this situation without even really knowing it. Here's how my beliefs played into, having my life how it was, back then. Mm-hmm. Is that what you mean?
Yes and no. I mean, when you start looking at this stuff and you do take that step of looking back on where your life has taken you up until this point, you can sort of see how these ideas, these concepts were at play in your life. But for me, and I know you had asked me if we could talk about this at some point in this podcast, but my background is in cognitive science.
Yeah, I find that fascinating.
Which is, it's a cross-faculty degree in philosophy, psychology, linguistics, and computer science. So it's a very broad background.
Right.
And originally I went into cognitive science because I wanted to be a real life Susan Calvin, who, for those who are not sci-fi fanatics, Susan Calvin was a character in Isaac Asimov's books. She was this brilliant roboticist. She invented the positronic brain, and she was just absolutely brilliant. She had absolutely no social skills whatsoever. So I wanted to be Susan Calvin, but with social skills.
With social skills.
With social skills. A little bit of adaptation on that.
Yeah. It was her brilliance that sort of inspired me to go into this cognitive science. I wanted to get into robotics and artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
But when I started this degree, where I am, things like philosophy are not taught in high schools. Mm-hmm. So when I went to university and I took my first philosophy course, it was mind-blowing to me. It was just, this is what I have been missing my entire life, This is what education is supposed to be. These ideas, these big ideas that I had never been exposed to before they just opened my mind completely. And with that, my sort of main tracks within the cognitive science, I took the computer science and the linguistics and stuff, but I took as many psychology and philosophy courses as I could. And when I deal with law of attraction, that is the lens that I see this all through, is through that philosophy and psychology background. So when I write books and my blog and just the whole way I approach this subject is with that in mind. So when they start talking about these concepts of synchronicity and stuff with law of attraction, I see the threads from philosophy and from psychology that back those concepts up.
Right.
And a lot of people, they think this whole law of attraction stuff, and this doesn't get bashed a lot for being, hippie woo-woo.
I know, right?
Nut job stuff, right?
Yeah.
They're irrelevant, useless hippie dreamers.
Yeah.
But
right.
But these concepts, and I refer to it as law of attraction. That's the language I use because that is the language that things like The Secret have put into the mainstream.
Right, same
but
here.
These
yeah.
concepts have been around in one form or another for, as long as human beings have
forever.
been around.
Right.
And when you start looking at the psychology behind this, you see that this is not hippy-dippy woo-woo stuff. There is an actual factual scientific basis behind it.
Right.
So it just depends on which branch you're sort of coming at it through.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Can you give an example maybe from philosophy or even psychology?
Okay, well, let's go with the psychology stuff. One book that I wrote was called Mind Shifting.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I talk about in mind shifting is this concept of psychological filters. And in Law of Attraction, we talk about manifesting things as if these things just sort of pop up out of nowhere.
Right.
We talk about synchronicity, and we talk about, like, if you've ever read Pam Grout and all her, manifest a butterfly, manifest a scrunchie kind of things.
Mm-hmm. Right.
If you look at the psychology behind this stuff, you see what you expect to see.
Mm-hmm.
So once you sort of tell yourself, and this is, okay, best example of this, if you have, well, you obviously haven't, but if you've ever been pregnant, okay, or if you're trying to get pregnant, or if you've lost a baby, and this is something that I can speak about personally. I had a miscarriage before I had my son, and I remember after I lost that baby, and my fiance at the time was pushing me to get back out. I was devastated, and I was having a hard time coping. He's like, you have to get out, you got to get out of the house, blah, 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 blah. And when I went out to places like the grocery store, or just anywhere outside my house, it was overwhelming, and it was heartbreaking because everywhere I went,
you saw babies.
There were pregnant women. There were these big bellies. There were tiny babies, and it was devastating.
Yeah.
And if you talk to other women who have had miscarriages, who had this experience, they tell you the same thing. Mm-hmm. They're everywhere, but you never noticed it beforehand. Mm-hmm. It's and you can tell yourself. From a manifesting perspective, you could say you're manifesting these things into your life. Mm-hmm. But from a psychology perspective, there's a filtering that occurs. Those pregnant women, those babies, they were always there, but they were never really overly important to you, so they just kind of faded into the background. Mm-hmm. But once that concept of baby became important to you, it got boosted up from your subconscious to your conscious mind as being something important.
Important, right.
So instead of being filtered out and just left in the background, it sort of sent a trigger saying, pay attention to this. So you started noticing it.
Right.
And that's how, like, a lot of this stuff works that way. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Once you sort of make something important, you start seeing those things around you. So if the yellow butterfly or the green car that Pam Grout talks about has suddenly become important to you, you will start to notice it. Yeah. And this is important. Those are just sort of silly little examples, but if you're trying to build something that's important to you, a dream, or there's a goal that you want to achieve, if you start focusing yourself on that goal or on that dream, you are going to start noticing all these little things around you that you'd never noticed before because they weren't important. They faded into the background.
Right.
But now that you've made it a point to pull that into your conscious mind, all these little opportunities, all these little synchronicities, all these little magic things, you're going to become aware of, because now they're important. Mm-hmm. So it's just that kind of thing that fascinates me about this whole subject area, because it has these bases in fields like psychology and fields like philosophy and all these sorts of things.
Yeah, and I think even in I heard of something in in the brain, I think, scientifically, what's it called? The RAS.
Yes, the reticular activating system. I talk about that in the book.
Yeah, and that's the same thing. It looks for patterns, right?
Right.
So that's, you think you just buy a certain car and then you see that car everywhere or something like that. That's fascinating.
Well, see, again, that's the exact example that Pam Grout uses in her book about the green car or whatever it is.
Right. And
you activate the reticular activating system.
Right. I don't know if you're familiar with NLP, neuro-linguistic programming.
I have heard of it. I know just a tiny little bit about it, but
yeah, it's fascinating. I actually got certified in it almost 2 years ago now.
Cool.
And and that's a lot of the basis of what I do my coaching on. But same thing in there. We have the idea of psychological filters. We call them meta programs, is what we call them.
Yep.
You have a program of running away from, moving away from things or moving towards things, or being a reactor or responder. You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely
proactive. So it's same thing. It's all in how you see things. And the fascinating thing is, that with those filters, only a very small amount of the sensory data that you get from your environment really makes it into your conscious mind.
It's a fraction of a percent.
Yeah.
But there's reasons for that. That's a survival mechanism.
Exactly.
You'd just be overloaded. If you could pay attention to everything that was going around you all the time, you'd go insane. You're constantly being bombarded by information. So your brain has to have these filters in place in order to allow you to function in the world.
Yeah. Now, what about, let's say, the spiritual component? Because people might say, if that's all there is to the law of attraction, then it's no more than just a psychological trick. I know people who say that kind of thing. What would you say? Is there obviously a spiritual component to it?
Well, I kind of look at that with sort of two minds.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, so what if it is?
Yeah.
It works.
Right.
And that's the thing that gets me about this. And I know there's a lot of controversy surrounding Esther Hicks, the Abraham Hicks stuff, for instance.
Yeah.
A lot of controversy out there. A lot of people like to bash her and blah, 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 blah. I actually wrote a blog article about this quite a ways back. Mm-hmm. But the point is, whatever you want to call it, whatever makes it work, the fact is that it does. So whether it's, mystical mumbo jumbo or whether it's science, does it matter?
Right.
Right?
True. Yeah. Exactly.
If we can use this to help improve our own lives and to help improve the lives of other people around us, then what does it matter?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I just mentioned that because I know I've heard other people who've said something like that. If it's just a psychological trick, but as you said, it doesn't really matter if it improves things. And
it reminds me of people who. There was a book I read called The Path of a Christian Witch, and in this book, the woman was learning, all about the shielding and things like this, and she was worried. She's like, well, what if it's all in my head? And she goes, and the instructors said, it is. It is all in your head. But the point is, it doesn't matter. And that's what they said to her, is it doesn't matter that it's in your head.
Echoes to Harry Potter with that one. Is this all in my head? Well, of course it's all in your head. But that doesn't make it any less real.
Right.
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Right.
No, exactly.
A lot of great wisdom with J.K. Rowling stuff.
just
Parallels everywhere.
Just as long as it works. However you can get
exactly.
the energy, I always tell you, however you can spend the energy to make it work for you.
Yeah.
Go on ahead and do it.
And that's the thing. And some people will approach this from a very rigid sort of technical scientific background. Some people will want to approach it completely from a very fluid spiritual background.
Right.
And then there are those of us like me who are kind of stuck in the middle and sort of see both aspects. Mm-hmm. So it's all roads lead to Rome, as they say, right?
Yeah. Well,
it's just because somebody else's path is different than yours doesn't mean it's the wrong path, right?
Well, I came across someone just the other day who said they were atheist and still used the law of attraction. It worked for them, obviously, and so that's that was fascinating. You know what I mean?
That's cool.
So yeah, definitely anyone can use it. My own background, I come from more magical sort of background, like a witchy, so you know what I mean. Like I've studied a lot of ceremonial magic, and it's all the same thing. Like it's the same principles, no matter where you're coming at it from. Which is when you see that, when you read all these different books and look at all these different traditions, and you see the same principles just in different terms.
Yeah.
Then you really start to see, this is all the same truth.
Exactly. And this is something else I've written about elsewhere as well. But whenever I get into this kind of discussion, I always think of a diamond.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
A diamond has many, many different facets to it.
Yeah.
Okay? So when I think of religion and spirituality and things, I think of it in terms of a diamond. There are many, many different ways of looking at something, but they all add to the whole. They're different ways of explaining the whole, right? And especially with something like a diamond, the more facets it has, the more beautiful it sparkles. Right?
Exactly right.
The more ways we have of interpreting and understanding something, the more fully we come to understand that thing, right?
Right. It reminds me
if
of,
that's too sort of technical for people, there's that parable about the blind man and the elephant.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
The elephant.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, do you want to tell the story?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, you tell the story so people know the story.
There are a whole bunch of, blind men who come up to an elephant and they say, okay, let's see what this elephant is. And
tell us what an elephant is. What is an elephant?
Yeah. And so one, feels the trunk and, it's like a big hose or a big tube or something, and one feels the tail and it's like a big snake, and one feels the leg and it's like a big trunk, and like a big tree trunk, and
none of them are wrong.
None of them are wrong. They all come back with these different conflicting stories of what the elephant is, and it's
from their point of view, from their perspective, they have described it accurately.
Right.
But it's only when you put all those pieces together that you get a fuller idea of the whole, right?
Right.
So that's how I tend to look at these sorts of questions. There are different ways of looking at the same thing, different ways of explaining the same thing, different ways of understanding an aspect of the whole.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Now, what kind of work do you do, let's say, with the subconscious mind? I imagine, as dealing with cognitive psychology, because I know for me the subconscious mind plays a big role in your ability to manifest.
It plays a huge role in our ability to manifest things, because so much of what we do, and again this goes back to this being bombarded with data 24/7 and having to have filters in place and automated scripts and things in order to help us cope with life in this world.
Right.
Our subconscious plays a huge role in our ability to create the kinds of experiences and things that we want in life, because when so much of what we do is based on subconscious actions, it's based on automated scripts and things that have been put in place to help us cope. Mm-hmm. And when you keep in mind that most people who come to this law of attraction stuff are coming to it as an adult. Okay?
Yeah.
So a lot of our coping mechanisms, a lot of our automated scripts were created when we were children.
Mm-hmm.
That's just reality. That's just psychology. It's the brain trying to protect itself. It's the psyche. It's emotions. It's everything trying to protect this person, this individual, this creature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it becomes automated, and we start to behave according to those automated scripts without understanding why we've created them, and in many cases that we have created them.
Exactly.
So much of our adult behavior is based on coping mechanisms that we learned and put in place growing up, that while they were useful when we were younger, while they were helpful when we were younger, they're just interfering as we get older. And, a lot of what I try and do is help people to understand the kind of automated programs that they're running, so that they can see where their resistances, where their interfering behaviors, their self-sabotaging behaviors come from, so that they can create new programs.
I think it's so hard for people to see that themselves because it's...
Absolutely.
The subconscious mind makes it almost like a fact, you know? Well, of course it's that way. That's just how... Well, how do you know? Well, it just is.
Yeah, it just is.
It just is, you know?
Yeah.
It just is.
It reminds me of, Christine, you can probably speak to this, but when you were the Johari window? When you were in
Yes, the
school,
Johari window.
and the blind spot?
Blind self.
Or the blind self?
Yes.
Yeah.
So basically, if I can remember, there are different aspects of the Johari window, and then there's the Nohari window, which is the negative stuff more. But basically, you have a blind self,
Sorry, a loud motorcycle outside.
and you have. So there's the blind self. I don't remember all of the aspects. Do you?
I'm not sure what this. I've never heard of this before. What is
Never
this
heard of this?
Johari
Well,
window stuff?
She was a mental health major. I don't know what... Do you know what... like,
The
any
guy's
traditional-
name was Johari, I believe. I'm not exactly sure. We had to do a project about, like, we had to have people we had to interview, like, our family and our friends, and they had to tell us, like, what they saw about us that we didn't realize. So that would be your blind self
blind
that
self.
other people see,
No, sir.
Okay.
and no one,
sir.
and you don't.
Yeah.
And then you have the known self, which is what you see, like what you know, and others don't, I believe.
Okay.
And then,
Yeah.
we should look it up, maybe.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look that up. That's
Yeah, it
fascinating.
was interesting, but, you know, I
Oh
thought
my
of the
goodness, we
blind
did something.
self.
We did something similar in my graduate program.
Yeah.
They gave us options to, like, you could read an article or whatever. I forgot what it was. I avoided the family interview thing. Like,
You're afraid of
I
that?
just told my professor, I'm straight not doing that. So
Oh,
you
it's
can,
scary. It's scary because people tell you, it's great when they tell you the positive aspects, but when they tell you
Well-
the negative
Negative,
one,
yeah.
it's like, oh.
well, and there's just some other stuff I couldn't do that with my family. That just,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like, it's
You have
just,
to have
it's more than
connection.
it's scary thing. It's just, we have a different kind of connection.
Kind of relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just not going to allow for stuff like that.
Right, yeah. That's hard. But yeah, it reminds me of the blind self. You know, 'cause I know with my clients, when I point out, yeah, this is what you're doing. And a lot of times, I don't know if you notice this, Natalie, but with a lot of people, you point out something, and it's one of those things where it's right under their nose, and like, oh. Mm-hmm. You know, like now that you say it, it's so obvious, but I never even really thought about it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like, oh yeah, of course that's there, but I never saw it.
That's why you need a coach.
That's why you need a
because
coach.
They can point to the self that,
Right.
you know, that you
That you
can't,
can't
see.
see.
Jinx.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, that's the thing about the subconscious mind. It makes it so self-evident, but then it's not to everyone, and you have to realize that. And you have to be able to question your own patterns. And that takes so much self-awareness, which is difficult.
But that's the path that people who get into this stuff are on, though, right?
Right, yeah.
So,
That's what I always tell everyone is, you know, because a lot of people come to the law of attraction wanting a quick fix. Oh, I just want, you know, a new house or a new car or whatever. It takes so much self-development to really get into this stuff and really get good at manifesting. I mean, yeah, most people can manifest something quick and easy, but to really get the more important stuff in life, the bigger stuff in life, it takes so much inner work, you know, and that it's a path. It's a path, and you can't rush it.
I think my view on this is probably a little bit different.
Yeah?
Because
Let's hear it.
Again, I wrote another article about this kind of thing. It's the phrase I used was monkey bars or mansions. It's all the same thing.
Yeah.
So this is watching my daughter, who was 5 at the time. Mm-hmm. We were at the park, and she had been trying all school year to get across the monkey bars. Aww. And she couldn't do it. She couldn't do it. She didn't have the arm strength. She just wasn't big enough.
Yeah.
But she was determined. And every day we'd go to this park, and she would get like 1 or 2 monkey bars in, and then she'd fall to the ground. And then she'd be right back up there. And over and over and over again, every day she was doing this. She wanted to do the monkey bars like the big kids.
Aww.
And then one day we were there, and it was just... it was like, okay, today's the day I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And she got up and she got 3 monkey bars in and she fell. Mm-hmm. And then she got up and she went 3 monkey bars in and she fell. And she sat there on the ground in the sand for a little while. But I could just see, there was just something I could feel. And she just looked up at those monkey bars and she just got this expression on her face and she got back up and she went and she crossed the entire monkey bars.
Wow, that's so cool.
And it was like this, and that's the thing. It's when you manifest something, it almost always happens at the point where you just know that it's going to happen.
Like
it's
a
just
switch.
It's not. It is. It's like a switch. It's just
a sweet spot.
You just there's no it's not even an excitement thing. It's not a woohoo. Yeah. It's just a very calm, very assured.
It's just a knowing,
Yeah.
It's a knowing this is going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think that is the key for anything you're trying to manifest, whether you're trying to cross the monkey bars, whether you're trying to get the house, whether you're trying to get the job at work, whatever it is that you want to manifest, it comes when you believe, when you know that it's going to be. So in that sense, I don't think it matters how big or how small the thing you're trying to manifest is. It's a matter of alignment.
Right.
So the only reason the big things are harder for us is because we make them harder. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. From the perspective of the universe, it doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're trying to cross the monkey bars or whether you're trying to get the dream house.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It's just your perspective and the blocks that you create for yourself that block that knowing.
Exactly.
So from that perspective, yes, it's more work, but only because we make it more work.
I think that the journey, for me, where it comes in is the journey to get to that knowing. Once you get there, it's like, oh, that was easy. But the journey to getting there, it's like, I'm a classical pianist also. And, when I'm learning, let's say a new piece on the piano, and initially it's like, oh, this is really hard. Just I don't have, I'm really into, like the theory behind practicing. I don't know if you've ever read the, what's it called? The Talent Code. Thank you. And, it's like you don't have those connections initially to that get that skill, that technique, and then you practice it, and it's really hard at first. And then by the time it's performance day, it's like, oh, this is easy. Like, why was this ever hard? Or, I've had the experience of having like this real difficult section, and I practice it and practice it and practice it, and I leave it for a week.
Yep. And
then I come back to it, it's like, why was it ever hard?
That comes back to those subconscious programs, right?
Exactly, right. So for me, and this is how I talk about it, it's the same thing with manifesting, where it's like, okay, subconscious mind, just let's say for money or something, it's just not used to thinking about, let's say, money being easy to earn in big amounts or something. Okay, well, we practice it, and it's really hard at first, and it just doesn't have those connections. And then once it has the connections, oh yeah, it's easy. It's no problem. So that's, I think the journey to getting to that point of it being, okay, I just know it's going to happen, that's really where the work is, you know what I mean, for things like that.
And I can attest to that too, because ever since 2012, I've been subject to migraines, and I've had them for 5 years now, and they've actually finally started to get better, but it was a long journey for me to realize why I had the migraines and what I could do, emotionally, subconsciously, to help, with the healing process. Right. But if I hadn't gone through that journey, I wouldn't be the person I am today. Mm-hmm. And I learned so much about myself during that time that I could have never learned otherwise. And it was a very painful journey, and I'm sure it didn't have to be that way, but I feel like the way I learned everything, I couldn't have learned any other way. And it was a really interesting journey. It still is, really.
that sort of brings up to mind another one of my favorite topics is this concept of suffering. And whether it's necessary.
Yeah,
do we have to? And again, something else I've written about. This idea that we need to suffer in order to either be worthy of our dreams or in order to learn what we need to learn.
Right.
And there's several quotes out there from Hemingway to Leonard Cohen about there is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in.
Yeah.
Can you understand these things? Can you work with these concepts if you haven't suffered? And it's an interesting question because I think many people learn a great deal through their suffering.
Right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think there are many more people who are just destroyed by their suffering.
I agree.
That's true. I know.
So what is the difference? What is the key that makes the difference between those who are able to learn and grow from having suffered and those who are destroyed by it? And I was just listening to you talk about this journey with your migraines, and my belief is that one of those keys is people's ability to change the way they look at it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
Because I grew up Catholic, and in the Catholic religion, there is this concept of offer it up, to the souls in purgatory, etc. Basically, that, suffering is a good thing.
Yeah.
And it destroyed me because I also have congenital glaucoma, so my vision isn't that great, and I've had many eye surgeries. So I went through a lot, is what I'm saying, and but I could have, and I did let it destroy me at first because I didn't. Like, people would tell me that, and it made me so jaded for healing, for wanting healing, because I'm like, well, I don't deserve any kind of healing. So, and I should just be suffering all the time. But sometimes when, I don't really see it as suffering anymore, I guess. I see it as learning. And maybe that's the key, is you don't want to see your pain or anything as suffering. Maybe seeing it as a positive experience, as growth. And as a challenge, I guess, to create something different.
And this is one of those things that you can come at this from all different kinds of suffering.
Oh, yeah.
There's physical suffering. There are people who've suffered abuse. There's loss. There's grief. There's just any number of ways that people can suffer.
Yeah.
And I am very careful not to tell people that their suffering is a good thing, because I don't believe that suffering is.
Right, exactly. But what you can get out of it.
But it's one of the things that my father taught me, and I lost my father several years back to cancer. It was a very long battle, and it was not a good death.
Yeah.
But one of the things that he taught me, just in the way that he lived his life, and he'd been through our family had been through some terrible, terrible things. But in watching how he coped with all of these things, what I learned from him is that you can't always control the bad things that happen in life.
Right.
When they happen, there's one of two things that are going to happen. They're either going to make you bitter, or they're going to make you stronger. But that's a choice that you have to make, and it is definitely a choice.
Yes.
I firmly believe that people are only victims. No matter what they've been through, you are only a victim if you believe you're a victim.
I
agree with that.
So you can take the horrible, awful, terrible things that you have been through in life, and you can use them as your stepping stone. You can use them as your springboard to build something incredible for yourself.
Right.
Because through the things that you have been through, you have a very, very unique perspective, a very unique way of looking at the world that other people just don't have, that other people cannot have. And with that kind of a background, you can create something really beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
But you have to want it. You have to believe that you're worthy of it, and you have to take the steps to move towards it. because so often when we suffer, we just kind of collapse.
Exactly.
You know, the suffering. No, I don't care for that either. I mean, if you're learning something, if it's a life lesson you have to go through, that's fine. But outside of that, to me, it's that is you don't have to do that. You can just kind of find a way out of that.
Exactly. Right.
You know, there's some things you have to go through, and that's fine. But
it just reminds me of that belief in the starving or struggling artist. I mean, that's a choice.
Oh, I know. Right. Exactly.
It's just because it's a social construct doesn't mean it has to be a reality.
Exactly.
Sorry, Justin, I just had to jump in there because just what you were saying just made me think of that.
No, that's all right. I'm just, if you are suffering, it should only be for the life lesson outside of, or to gain a certain skill set. Outside of that,
right?
You're only doing it because you haven't met or gained the ability to not do it.
And suffering is such a bad word.
I was just gonna say that.
Yeah, if you're struggling or whatever, I just don't go along with that concept.
It's like
oh, you got to, I can't.
It's like the difference for me is like the difference between the burn of, let's say, lifting weights and stretching your muscle. You know what I mean? Like tearing those muscle fibers, but they're going to re-grow stronger versus just all out pain for no point. Like I can't. Those are totally different concepts to me. You know, one is, okay, well, I'm doing something, you know, I'm working through this resistance in order to get stronger or to, gain something better versus just pointless suffering.
Yeah.
Right. So totally different concepts for me.
Yep.
And like all three of us, Natalie, I don't know if I told you this, but all three of us are visually impaired to various degrees. I'm totally blind. Christine has some vision. Justin has a very little bit of vision. And so all three of us, have had to deal with, building a life despite those challenges. And there are, visually impaired people out there who take it a lot worse, and that's it's very hard for them, and there are others who take it really, really well. And so I think it's a great example because it's not, I would never say you have to be that way or but it's,
you can create
you have to make of life what you have. You have to play with the hand of the cards you have.
Right.
And make the best of it. And that's always been my philosophy. Like for me, there's never a point, why should I be upset about it when there's nothing I can really do about it? So I'm just going to do what I can with it and make the best of it. Right. So that's how I've always seen it.
Yeah. And that's sort of how my dad approached when he got diagnosed with cancer. It was, you can sit there and you can bemoan your fate and this isn't fair and how come other people never have to deal with anything and I've had to deal with so much. And you can just get overwhelmed with all of that, but what does it get you?
Exactly.
Right.
And he's just like, okay, well, it is what it is. And he followed all his doctor's instructions and stuff. He did his exercises and he showed up for his treatment. But outside of that, like, as far as his illness allowed him to, obviously right after he had treatments and stuff and he just wasn't well enough to, but he was living his life. He was throwing dinner parties and sculpting little mashed potato pears with bay leaves on.
That's great.
He was going to his art class and he was painting and he was living his life and he wasn't wasting the life that he did have by being devastated about the bad parts of it. And there's a strength in that it's, I don't know. It's just my father was always one of my biggest heroes, and it's just watching him go through what he did with the grace and the dignity and the humor that he did was just, I think it inspired absolutely everyone around him. And that wasn't what he was trying to do. Right. He didn't go out there and say, damn it all, I'm going to go out by inspiring everybody.
Right.
Yes.
Like, all right, well,
it's just natural.
I'm just going to be me and do my thing.
Right, and that's the journey to to inner healing and inner peace is you have to accept where you are. But and if you want to create something else, you create it, but the first key to any healing is acceptance. Acceptance and the emotional healing and inner healing is what,
because you can't heal when you're fighting.
No, you can't. Right. Nope.
Same with manifestation. You can't create something different as long as you're fighting where you are right now.
Yeah,
right.
That's always been the first key, making peace with where you are now. And then you can create something else. But you have to come to terms with it. Okay, here's where I am. I always say start with where you are. Here's where I am. I can't deny that. I can't pretend it doesn't exist. But I'm going to choose something else.
You have to live in your now,
right?
Yes.
While you're creating,
right,
your next steps, right?
I love having this discussion because I remember back with Abraham Hicks several years ago when Jerry Hicks had cancer.
When he was sick, yeah.
When he was sick. And, there's a question from a lot of people. Oh, why is he sick, or why did he die when he has all these principles to use? And, well, it has to happen sometime,
Yes.
And, he's not going to be immortal. But
also you can't know for sure what anybody else is dealing with, right? And Jerry Hicks was human, just like the rest of us.
Right.
He had his own struggles. He had his own resistance issues. He had his own fears, his own... we can't know
what he went through.
What was going on in his mind. So it's... And everybody has the aspects of this that they're really good at and other aspects that they struggle with.
Exactly, right.
So...
Yeah, we have. There's so much. I don't think we'll ever be done because there's so many different areas of life. One person might be really good at manifesting money. One person might be good at relationships. One person might be good at health, and they're totally different issues.
I can manifest any shower curtain I want.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
That's great.
I don't even have shower curtains in my house. I need work in that area.
I see a shower curtain that I want. If I'm redecorating a bathroom, I see in my mind the shower curtain I want, and I'm telling you, I walk into a store and it's just there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That is awesome.
Not going to change the world or anything, but my bathrooms are always decorated.
You will have your shower curtains.
That's awesome. Yeah, but we have different skill sets. That's awesome.
Put that on my resume. I'm telling you.
I can manifest shower curtains.
I love it.
You can. Yeah, it's funny.
Last area I wanted to cover real quick is something that really, it kind of fits perfectly into what we're discussing now, but in one of your podcasts, I believe, you mentioned about how fear can be an ally. And I wanted you to speak to that for a few minutes because I think that's fascinating. I totally agree with that. I think a lot of us try to escape those negative emotions, those uncomfortable emotions, and you can't. You can't deny them. So I wanted to see what you had to say about that.
Okay, well, two things there. First of all, there are no negative emotions, right? Emotions, there's a scale here. It's like your emotions are just there as feedback. They let you know where you are in terms of your alignment with something. So the emotions that we tend to think of as negative are just a signpost saying, hey, you're drifting out of alignment with what you want.
Yep.
Okay, they're not bad in and of themselves. They're information.
Yep.
Okay? But fear, let's talk specifically about fear here, because, as you know, I think that's why you contacted me, was about my book that was based on, it was all about fear.
Yeah.
But fear can be used as your ally. When you look at it as a signpost that says, what you want is found here. And this is everybody knows that Jack Canfield quote about, everything you want is on the other side of fear.
Yeah.
And that is so true. There's another quote. There's a poet, name escapes me at the moment, but it's the one about our greatest fears, our deepest fears are like dragons guarding our greatest treasure. And the gift that you have, that you came here to give, is going to be surrounded by fear, because anytime you do anything that puts you out there, anytime you take your dream and share it with the world, you're opening it up to scrutiny, to judgment, to possibly ridicule and condemnation. And I mean, that is scary. It is scary to do that.
It is.
But you cannot build that dream unless and until you put it out there.
Right.
So the things that scare us the most are usually an indication that they're going to get you closer to that dream.
Right.
And the reason they scare you so much is because it pushes you out there.
Right.
So one of the things that terrifies most people is speaking in public.
Yeah.
It is people fear that more than they fear death in many cases.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But that's also one of the biggest things that people can do in order to get closer to their dreams, because you have to be able to explain it to other people.
Yeah.
You have to be able to bring it out there and show it to people and make people understand it.
Yep.
And that involves getting up there and talking in front of people.
Right, yeah.
So, and this is one of the things, I joined Toastmasters because I was absolutely terrified of speaking, and I was like terrified. I was verging on panic attacks. The first few speeches that I did, it was like my heart was pounding so hard against my chest. I don't know if it's actually physically possible, but I was actually afraid that my heart would bruise itself. It was slamming so hard against my rib cage, I was afraid it would damage itself. And you've heard that phrase, like, cotton mouth?
Yeah.
I had never in my life had that happen to me, but my mouth would get so dry. It was like the Sahara Desert. Like, it was terrifying. And I'd be sitting there before a speech, and I didn't know whether I was going to throw up or pass out or both. It was horrible. Absolutely horrible. But going out to Toastmasters and doing the whole public speaking thing, it opened up a number of doors for me. I met a wonderful, wonderful mentor through, and I've had a number of fabulous mentors through Toastmasters, but I met somebody who actually helped me to get the book done. I mean, he's written a number of books himself, and he was just, I'd mentioned to him that I wanted to write a book, and he's like, all right, write it. And I was like, well, okay then.
Yeah, right.
So I wrote the book, and he was wonderful. He read the first draft for me, he ripped it apart for me, and it was just, but I got that book written. Yeah. And I remember one day, and I was so embarrassed when he did this, but I was also really proud of myself. He had a copy of my book, and he walked into our Toastmasters meeting, and he held this book up in front of everybody, and he said, do you know how many people have told me throughout the years that they have wanted to write a book? He said dozens, hundreds of people have told me that they wanted to write a book. And I have given time, I have talked to every single one of them. She's the only one who actually did it.
Wow.
I believe it. That's so common.
And again, like, to write that book, to put Fearless out there was, I mean, it was scary. You write a book and you're terrified. I mean, what are people going to say? What if everybody hates it? What if it's not as good as I think it is? And it's what if nobody takes me seriously as a real writer? And all these things go through your head. But until you face that fear and just do it, you're never going to write the book. So if you let the fear dictate to you the course of your actions, you're never going to achieve the things you want to achieve. But if you look at it and say, okay, this is what scares me, and say, all right, then that's what I'm going to do.
Right.
And
then that's how you can use it as an ally. And I mean, like, there are certain fears. You don't have to conquer all your fears. And there are certain fears that are worth conquering and others that are not. And I cover all of that in the book. Right. But for the most part, those things that terrify you are the things that are pointing you in your best direction.
Worth pursuing, yeah. I totally agree with that.
I love that. I never realized that. I love it.
I always,
your fears that are around the things, especially things that you really want to do or would love to do, or the things places you should look, things you should do.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was like, one of my big things was I ended up dropping out of college. I had this big subconscious belief because it was always drilled into my head that you had to, finish college and get a good job and go out and get, and be paid well and all that. Mm-hmm. And I knew it wasn't a match for me. Mm-hmm. I knew, but there was this horrible fear, like, oh my gosh, I'll be a failure. Mm-hmm. I'll be a failure. Mm-hmm. But, I did it, and I knew, like, I wanted to work for myself. I wanted to do something with spirituality and things like that, helping other people. It took me several years. It seems not like that long now, but at the time, I had one after another failed pursuit, failed business, until co-creation coaching. Yeah. And you know what I mean? Like, you just have to keep going and keep going. I
totally understand. That's another thing I talk about in the book too, is like, because fear of failure, there's 4 main fears that derail people's dreams. And I cover those in the book, but fear of failure is one of the biggest. And what I talk about in the book is changing the way we look at failure, because so many times people look at failure and they're like, okay, I failed. That's it. I'm useless now. Right, I'm a failure. Right. Yeah. Okay. But no, you have to start thinking of failure as a process, as stepping stones to the greater goal. So you look at any major success out there, and they only got to that success after a string of failures.
Many failures.
By building on the failures that they created their eventual success. There's a kid's book out there, Ashley Spires, I hope I'm pronouncing that well. She wrote this children's book called The Most Magnificent Thing. And I saw it, I bought it for my kids. I actually did I can't remember whether it was a podcast or video, but I referenced this book. She had an illustration in here at one point. It was about this little girl who wanted to create the most magnificent thing. Mm-hmm. And she went through all these different things, and she had her little sidekick dog with her, so it was really super cute. But every time she created something, it crashed or it didn't work. And she just had this, and over again, she would try and she would fail. And she finally just got so upset, she just walked away from it all. And there was this shot of this sidewalk, and all these things that she tried and failed lined up along the sidewalk. So she went for a walk, and then she came back with her dog. And as she's walking down the sidewalk, looking at all her failures, she's realizing, oh, wait, that piece would work with that piece. Mm-hmm. And that could go with that piece. Mm-hmm. And she was realizing how all her failures had elements to them that she could adapt. And she created something from all those bits of failures. Yeah. She created something new. And it wasn't at all the way she'd originally imagined it would be, but it turned out to be exactly the thing she wanted. It turned out to be her most magnificent thing after this string of failures. Wow, so I love that story. I think every child should read that story. And I bought it because my son was really getting frustrated with himself at one point, and it's just a fabulous, fabulous book. Most magnificent thing.
I mentioned NLP earlier. In NLP, they have a saying. It's one of the central presuppositions of NLP, and one of their sayings is, "There's no such thing as failure, only feedback."
Yeah.
And I love that.
Beautiful.
Yeah. You never. It's just feedback for your next attempt, and then your next attempt, and then your next. You keep going until you succeed, and that's the only way to succeed. I mean. Yeah. You keep trying and trying and trying, because you only
fail if you give up, right?
Exactly. On the first time, you just don't have the knowledge to really. I mean, sometimes there's some flukes, and some people get it right away, but
once in a while. But there's just, the overnight success is a myth.
Right. Exactly.
For me, it's like I say, it wasn't that I failed; it just didn't work out that time. Just didn't work out. It just didn't work out. So when you just find your path, you'll get there. To me, there's no such thing as failure.
Exactly.
Sometimes you have to. I know where I work. Sometimes you have to tell a client it's okay to fail because they haven't been allowed to actually mess up.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. So that's a little different. But that's the only time I do that.
Yeah.
If other than that, for me, because to me, real folks, I like to say champions, never failed. They just kept figuring out a different way.
Exactly.
Or it's you didn't work 17 times. Well, that's just 17 different ways not to do it.
Yeah.
That's educational. And that's all that is.
Yeah.
So
we have this romantic ideal that, like you said, the overnight success, you go out and you have
and sometimes that happens.
The star, the celebrity, or
It hardly ever happens.
Every now and again, but usually you've had some false starts. That's what I call them. False start.
Yeah.
The referee blows the whistle, 5-yard penalty. That's just kind of how I think of it. That there's, then of course, then you get jealous of the guy who was his senior year in high school, walked onto the wrestling mat, and won a state championship. Yes, that does happen.
It does happen.
but
not that often.
But I wouldn't. Don't worry about that. There are people that that can be successful in a certain situation right off, but it's rare.
Exactly.
Usually, you end up having to work your way to it. Even if you've got the talent for it, the gift for it, you got to refine it. That's just how it works.
Now, that doesn't mean that it has to be hard, though.
No, it doesn't have to be hard.
And that's the other thing that people get caught up in, and this goes back to that concept of suffering. It's like it has to be hard or it's not going to happen.
Right, exactly.
No, that's not true.
So it's...
It may be hard, but it doesn't have to be.
Right.
It just takes you some consistent work,
Mm-hmm.
and you can make it, and it can happen for you.
Yep.
That comes back to that concept of failure being a process, or success being a process that includes failures. They're stepping stones.
One of the big concepts I include in what I say to people is persistence. When you're manifesting something or when you're trying to achieve a goal, persistence. You hold that vision until it's done, and you get there. You're persistent because it might not work out right away, but you just keep holding it and you keep holding it and you keep holding it, and you'll get there. You have to. Mm-hmm. Well, I really appreciate you spending this considerable amount of time with us today.
It's been
a great
awesome.
discussion. Just kept going and going and going.
This was amazing.
Great podcast.
Spending the time with us, and it was a great discussion. We really appreciate it.
I'm not sure there's anything we haven't covered.
It's awesome, though. I love it.
I'm gonna have to look at your.
We probably could have gone for another hour. You know what I mean? You have to stop at some point.
I'm gonna have to look at your podcast. I'm gonna have to read your page, your webpage, your articles. I read one.
They're really good.
Read your books and look at some of your stuff, your podcast.
Everyone who's listening should go check out Nathalie Thompson's website at vibeshifting.com. It's a really good site.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I really encouraged you to do that. That is a great site.
Yeah. So,
thank you so much.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. So, once again, for people who are listening, the show notes, if you want to leave comments, read the transcript, anything like that, you can go over to cocreationcoaching.org/create014. And if you want to rate, review, or subscribe to us on iTunes, you can head over to cocreationcoaching.org/create iTunes, and that'll redirect you to our iTunes page. So we appreciate everyone listening today, and again, big thank you to Nathalie for joining us. And so we'll be back here with another episode of Co-Create Your Life in 2 weeks. And once again, I am Brandon Oliveris.
And I'm Christina Oliveris.
And I'm Justin Williams.
Anything is possible.